Chicago Newsroom 2.0 is made possible by the generous financial support of the Field Foundation of Illinois and generous Chicagoans like you.
This week on Chicago Newsroom 2.0, roundtable favorites Hugo Balta, Jeffrey Beckham, and Sufyan Sohel are back to analyze and opine on the top news stories of the past week.
Chicago Public Schools Board Chair Harden is here to discuss his time leading the hybrid school board and his decision not to seek re-election to the board this November.
First Independent Bank's Demetrius Hutcherson and Andrew Maychruk join us to discuss the legendary bank's entry into the Chicago market and what it means for the city's underserved communities.
And Howard Brown Health CEO Dr. Travis Gayles returns to the newsroom to shine a spotlight on the more than $1 trillion of proposed health care cuts. I'm Glenn Eden.
And I'm Dr. Suzet McKinney. We've put together an incredible hour of hyper-local news and information that matters most to Chicagoans.
And it all starts right now. This week on the Roundtable, 3 major stories out of City Hall may seem unrelated on the surface, but together they paint a revealing picture of the leadership, governance, and the political headwinds facing Mayor Brandon Johnson as Chicago looks toward its future. First, the mayor is backing a proposal to create a standalone Department of Gun Violence Reduction, elevating violence prevention to a cabinet-level priority. Supporters argue the move would strengthen coordination, accountability, and long-term investment in community-based violence prevention. Critics, however, are questioning whether creating another city department is the right answer at a time when Chicago faces significant fiscal challenges and whether it will produce measurable improvements in public safety. Then, new details are adding yet another twist to the saga of Chicago's privatized parking meter system. Records show the city initially submitted a bid to reacquire the parking meter lease that was roughly $800 million higher than the price ultimately accepted by the sellers after Chicago exited the process. The revelation is prompting fresh questions about the city's buyback strategy, the valuation of one of Chicago's most controversial public assets, and whether taxpayers will ever have a realistic opportunity to unwind what many still consider one of the worst financial deals in American history. And finally, the political landscape is becoming increasingly dynamic. As recent polling shows Mayor Johnson approval ratings continue to slide, the field of mayoral challenges continues to grow. Just this past week, former Chicago Housing Authority Board Chair Matt Brewer, a frequent critic of the Johnson administration and a central figure in the recent dispute over leadership at the CHA, officially entered the race, adding another prominent voice to what is shaping up to be an increasingly competitive contest for City Hall. With public safety, city financing, housing, and confidence in government expected to dominate the campaign, the battle for Chicago's next mayor is already taking shape. Joining us now to break it all down are roundtable panelists Sufyan Sohel, chair of the Cook County Commission on Human Rights, Hugo Balta, publisher of the Latino News Network, and Jeffrey Beckham, CEO of Chicago Scholars. Gentlemen, welcome back to the newsroom. It's always good to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
We've got a lot to cover. It's juicy as always, so let's dive right on in. You know, Mayor Johnson has endorsed creating a standalone Department of Gun Violence Reduction. What is this proposal trying to solve, and how would it differ from current efforts that City Hall and the city has underway to curb violence prevention?
Well, look, I think it's looking to fix a coordination gaps problem, right? And that's what's really keeping Chicago from treating violence as a preventable public safety issue. Mm-hmm. So if this idea is to get one body in getting other people that are vested in solving for gun violence to work together, to have accountability, to pool resources, go for it, right? There are examples in Oakland and Newark that's worked. If this then becomes just another layer of bureaucracy, and it's very much showcasing and not necessarily has any meat to the bone, then this is going to be a problem that's going to be a problem from him when he runs for mayor again next year.
He hit it on the head. It's I think people are going to be watching if we're just adding another layer to what some would say very already bureaucratic system of governance, and or whether or not we're going to be able to handle the full spectrum of issues that gun violence is a factor of, right? Like you have mental health, you have public health, you have education, you have housing. All these things are interconnected, and will this new office be able to weave all those different pieces together? That's yet to be seen.
Yeah, sure. Everything.
Yeah, I mean, if we can coordinate the social determinants of health and put the pathways together in a coordinated effort and response, it makes a lot of sense. If you're housing data and transparency, funding and finance, jobs, and treating it like a public health issue that it is, you're making a great play. But to what my colleagues here have said, if this is something that just to create more red tape, it can be a hindrance.
Yeah, well, there's some voices out there that really want this, and that supporters are saying, they're arguing, a dedicated department would improve coordination and accountability. And so, and critics, they question whether or not adding another layer of government is, particularly at a time when we have limited resources, is it the right thing to do? So where do you sit on the debate? Where do you all sit on this?
I think it's a good idea if we are really practicing what the idea and the intent of the idea is to up coordination. Like Hugo said, in Newark and Oakland and other areas of the country, not only did they move public safety into the mayor's office, they financed it and built systems and structures around it. And you've seen remarkable reductions in violence in those cities as well. I think as Chicago being a major marketplace, a metropolis, we should look at best practice and repeat that here in our city as well.
Chicago has invested millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in violence prevention initiatives over the past few years. So, we're all residents and taxpayers here. What should success metrics look like?
I think fewer shootings, fewer homicides, higher school attendance, community pulse. And I think I agree with Jeff. People are going to be watching to see, are these just going to be extra meetings held, community gatherings, what's the output? And if it's not doing the results that they established, the metrics, and meeting those metrics, are they willing to pivot again to really address these concerns?
And look, yes, we do want to see the numbers and reductions of homicides, gun violence, but we also want to see the numbers and be very transparent about it, right? The devil's in the details. About the other effects around gun violence. So jobs for young people, programs, leadership programs for young people, mental health. So the measuring can't just be the numbers related to gun violence. It also, as you mentioned, has to be tied to the social determinants of health.
One of the things, and I think you alluded to this, Hugo, earlier on, is that, is this proposal likely to become a meaningful policy achievement for the mayor if it is created and executed? Or could this become another political flashpoint in already challenging fiscal and public safety environment?
Look, people have said, in particularly with the Brand administration, they want more results, visible results, and they want clear communication. So this could be something very good, or it could be another pie in the face for the mayor. It begins with being transparent. It begins with having quarterly reports that are very transparent about the response to gun violence and being honest about it. There's no turnkey solution, magic wand, but so there's an expectation that even this response might not reach the forecasted level of success, but it is grounded on what's already working elsewhere. So what can we learn from Oakland? What can we learn from Newark? What are those best practices and lessons learned so that we don't have to start at zero? We can start from a position of strength based on that knowledge.
And a lot of this is actually happening. So like Chicago Scholar sits as part of the My Brother's Keeper Brilliance and Excellence Collaborative, right? And that's spearheaded by the Obama Foundation. The challenge is that that's a private foundation doing work to impact a civic issue somewhat separate and apart. And so if this office is created and you bring those, I think 430 plus organizations in, and they're already doing a lot of what you said, Hugo, the data work. They're looking at shootings. They're actually looking at what is actually working in community, and you get a coordinated response through the mayor's office. This could be a big win, but it has to be done well. And I think the point in what we talked about, and we've talked about frequently, is that the communication strategy, right? How do you actually communicate this out to the public in a way that resonates and one that they are able to understand and digest?
And thank you, Jeffrey. That's a great way to wrap up that topic and finalize that and move on to our next topic, which is probably one of the most infamous topics of the city of Chicago, and that's our parking meter lease. So latest reporting reveals that Chicago's initial offer to buy back the parking meter lease was reportedly around $800 million higher than the price ultimately accepted by another buyer after the city exited. What does it tell you about how the buyback process was handled?
Poorly.
Look, it's a costly lesson about what happens when transparency, valuation, and accountability are not in alignment at the start. There were a lot of mistakes that were made for short-term gains at the price of a long-term control. And there's no solution for that either, right? Because we're talking about contracts that are decades from now and expiring. The only move here is to mitigate the situation. And again, there are examples of other cities where they've mitigated their contracts for mutual benefit. What you need to do is find that intersection that both parties will say, this is something that's good for us. What can we do? What can we pivot right now before, instead of 30 years from now, 40 years from now?
I think if this report is accurate, I as a taxpayer would like to know why this valuation was so different, right? And I would love some more information on that too.
Right. Well, moving on to the next question. This has been nearly 2 decades after the original lease agreement. Why is this parking meter deal so controversial still and just dramatic, I mean, why is that?
We started badly. A 75-year deal that I think was paid off within the first 5 years just tells you somebody didn't do math. I mean, it's basic math, right? And whatever math they did, it was some back of the napkin math to not understand what the potential financial opportunity was and risk for the city. And again, if this is true, $800 million, you're talking about a 40-year debt that the city would have to pay. A lot of folks that are making these decisions now are making short-sighted decision for long-term, debt that the people would have to pay back. And so it started badly, it's been run badly, it's still going badly. And I get it, right? We talk in sports terms, and oftentimes for a player to come back home, you got to spend a little bit more, but not $800 million more.
Yeah. I mean, what should future leaders of the city, take away from this? This isn't going away anytime soon.
I mean, the financial decisions like this require transparency, education, public education, and building that trust.
Yeah, and not have short-sightedness.
Yes.
I think too often we see elected officials really focusing on the now and really re-election. They have to really think about legacy and imagine what Chicago is going to be like 20, 30, 40 years from now and make decisions that are not just short-term gains.
Yeah. Well, this is the last question on this subject. Even if the city, had acquired the lease at a lower price, would buying back the meters have been a sound financial decision? Or are there stronger arguments for investing the resources elsewhere?
I mean, I think there's always stronger arguments for investing the resources elsewhere, right? The things that can yield a better return, right? More investment in developing housing, building out business infrastructure, which again, bring in tax bases and allow you to bring in more revenue as opposed to the meters. And unless you're gonna look at the meter deal as a city and start to do what these private companies have done, which means putting the tax on the backs of taxpayers again, that deal wasn't one that probably could yield the same thing where they could invest that in other resources.
Yeah.
And I also think there's a laundry list of other infrastructure areas, other public forward-facing areas that this money should be invested in. They can do a lot of good for a lot of people right now, as opposed to trying to solve for an ill-advised decision.
Yeah. Well, thanks. This is a great way to wrap up that this topic and move on to the mayoral race, which is starting to quickly take shape here. Recent polling suggests that Mayor Johnson faces significant political headwinds, and now that former CHA board chair Matt Brewer has officially entered the race. So how much should we read into the current polling this far ahead of the election in February? Because, 8 months is a lifetime in the municipal politics.
Very little.
Right, exactly. Early polling doesn't predict an election, but it is a litmus test of what voters are looking for.
Now.
And again, we've said it, once, twice, 3 times. They're looking for visible results and clear communication. And this administration has failed in both.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the administration's had some wins in public safety as well. So I won't say it's failed completely, but I will say the polling is very transparent on what people want, right? And it's a mandate on what you're going to be able to do and deliver on. And the polling numbers have stayed consistently low. And so, 8 months is a lot of time, but it's not that much time when you got folks amassing war chests of funds to run ads and be active in the landscape.
Absolutely. Matt Brewer's candidacy, as we all know, followed a very public clash with the mayor over leadership at CHA. How might that recent history shape his campaign and the broader conversation about the mayor's leadership in key agencies like CHA? Sufyan.
I hear the crickets on the table. I feel, when you have a mayor who's probably going to run again, we were talking earlier, he doesn't need to announce just yet because he's the mayor.
Absolutely.
Everyone who's running is going to show how they can do things differently. And if they can already demonstrate, hey, we already fought against him, and maybe in the court of public opinion, we won in some ways. They start with a powerful foot ahead in the race, right? And I think as we move forward, at least for me, as I watch elections happening right now around the country, I think voters are looking for people who can make things happen, as we're seeing in New York, very, very satisfied with his performance on fixing potholes to child care, et cetera, et cetera. How are our elected officials going to protect our most vulnerable communities? And how are some of our more powerful institutions, which are threatening democracy and the people, going to be challenged?
Correct.
And people who are able to voice that, and sometimes that's voicing the inability of the current administration to do some of those things, they're going to come out ahead.
Yeah, and I think Brewer is forcing the conversation about the mayor's government style. And he's already putting it into, it's about management, transparency, and accountability. And it's going to put the mayor with his back against the wall. He's going to really have to defend his approach.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the most powerful storytelling arcs is the contrast arc. So Matt out the gate has an opportunity to present that, a visible representation of what it looks like to be different. And calling it out, this is another African-American male who's young, who's respected, who's super sharp in the city, pretty well known, doing that. The contrast will be very clear. But what Matt will have to do is be able to separate himself and say, I'm not running out of spite, I'm running because of these things. And he'll have some time to do that over the coming months. It'll be interesting to watch where this all lands.
And the final question here is just beyond the individual candidates, because they're popping up every day. What issues are most likely going to define this mayoral campaign?
I think it starts with, we've talked about public safety, of course, the social determinants of health, education is certainly continues to be an area of focus for all residents of Chicago. City finances, we have continuous conversation about meeting the budget. And I also think it's about affordability. Over and over again, people say it's just not affordable to live in Chicago. And we're seeing different communities exiting Chicago to the suburbs. So I think that the perennial issues are going to be there. And I think they're around the social determinants of health.
Yeah, I think you'll hear a louder voice from the business community this go around too, even before. Just hearing the murmurs and the space. And I think you're going to hear them speak up like more than ever before around the fiscal elements of the city, how we manage our budget, but also what is the plan to bring businesses, shops, and stores back to the city of Chicago? I
don't know, for me, I want courage to stand up for our most vulnerable communities. And I want the vision that you can demonstrate that government can still solve some of these big problems that we have.
Well, as most folks say, buckle up. We're in for a ride. There's going to be so many more candidates coming to the fray, and we'll be here to talk about it. So, gentlemen, as always, thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
Happy to always have you with us. On the other side of the break, Suzet sits in conversation with Chicago Public School Board President Sean Harden. Stay with us.
They say television is about sitting back. We say it's about stepping up. Your block has stories worth telling. Your neighbors have voices worth hearing. Chicago has a heartbeat worth sharing. Stop watching their world. Start showing yours. It's time to tune in and be seen. Can TV, always here, always yours. Experience the power of community television.
Chicago Public Schools is navigating one of the most consequential periods in its history. From budget challenges and pension obligations to enrollment trends, leadership transitions, and the continued implementation of an elected school board, the decisions being made today will shape the future of public education in Chicago for years to come. At the center of many of those conversations is the president of the Chicago Board of Education, Sean Harden. Appointed to lead the board during this historic transition, Harden has overseen a period marked by intense public scrutiny, spirited debate, and critical policy decisions affecting more than 320,000 students and their families. As Chicago moves closer to electing its first fully elected school board, questions remain about governance, accountability, academic outcomes, financial stability, and the relationship between CPS leadership, educators, parents, and taxpayers. Joining us now to discuss the state of Chicago Public Schools, the challenges and opportunities ahead, and his decision not to seek election as the city's next school board president is Chicago Board of Education President Sean Harden. Sean, welcome to Chicago Newsroom 2.0.
Thank you for having me, Suzet. It's absolutely amazing to be sitting with you this afternoon.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into what is sure to be an exciting conversation. You stepped into the role as board president during one of the most significant transitions in CPS history. Looking back on your tenure, what do you consider your most important accomplishment, and where do you believe there's still unfinished work?
Yes, I did. I stepped in at a pivotal time in CPS history. First, let me just acknowledge that it was an honor for Mayor Johnson to even consider that I can serve in that capacity. So I was happy to take it, even knowing the challenges that were before us. As I look back, I think there are several things that I'm very proud of. I think the one that sticks out the most is probably the most obvious, and that is the selection of Dr. King as our permanent leader.
Sure.
I think the district was in desperate need of strong leadership, and I'm very proud of the work that we did and identifying her. I think people don't necessarily appreciate what a democratic process fully looks like when it's unpacked very transparently. But that was the first time as a school board, we were charged with the sole responsibility of identifying its next leader. And so I was pleased to be able to lead that effort, and now we have an amazing leader for the district.
That's great. That's great. Well, Chicago is moving toward its first fully elected school board. From your perspective, what do you think the biggest opportunities are there, as well as the biggest risks that now come with what will be a new governance model?
Yeah, I think we had to first examine what brought us here. What was the push in order to have an elected school board? And I think to summarize it, it was a loss or lack of trust.
Okay.
The community had lost trust in the current infrastructure being mayorally led, and they didn't feel like, and rightfully so, that there wasn't a clear indication that their voice, their concerns, and ultimately the decisions that were being made were being done in their best interest.
Okay.
And I think that was the impetus for moving into a fully elected school board. I think the opportunity that's before us is we can shape this so that it actually reflects the community's needs.
Absolutely.
I think that's where the opportunity lies. I think the risk is that with a democratic process, there's the politics.
Sure.
And we have to be careful to inoculate the board from the politics that often follows an election cycle.
Okay.
So I think there's opportunity there. There are a couple things that I've done to try to lay some foundation and create some guardrails for us, one of which is a resolution that I introduced to the board that would prevent board members from accepting contributions from vendors. Seems pretty basic, right?
That's right.
But right now the law allows up to $1,500 per vendor. I think there's an opportunity to set the bar a little higher, to demonstrate to the community that there's no pay to play, and that we can operate with an ethical kind of value system that starts to build trust again. So I'm hopeful that my resolution will pass in the coming weeks that kind of sets that standard, a higher bar than what the law requires.
I think that's great. Essentially what you're saying is you want to set this new elected school board up for success in the highest levels of transparency and accountability to the taxpayers.
100%, I think is critical. That's I think that was the impetus behind an elected school board.
Sure.
So we can't lull ourselves to sleep by thinking that by virtue of it being elected, that everything is going to be okay.
That's right.
Right? It's how people show up. It's the guardrails that are in place that will ultimately determine whether or not we are successful in this, what is actually an experiment.
Well, speaking of your leadership of the board, you've announced that you will not seek election as the next school board president. Talk to us a little bit about what factored into that decision and what advice would you offer the individuals who are seeking to lead the school board moving forward? Yeah,
so interestingly enough, this came up in my very first interview after I was appointed. I was immediately asked, will I be seeking, office when it goes to a full election? And my decision then is the same as it is now. And the answer is no, because I was on assignment.
Okay.
It was clear to me what my purpose was, and I want to show up, execute, do it at the highest level possible. And then I think ultimately my determination was to ensure that I leave it better than I found it, to create a blueprint for the next board and the next board president, set clear protocols and processes. As you alluded to, when I came in, it was all theory. Right, we had some bylaws and some structural, processes that we could follow, but no one really knew in practice how it was going to play out.
Okay.
Now, 2 years later, we're not in that same space. So I think my responsibility now is to set up the next president to be successful, the next board to be able to build from what we've learned.
I would say one of the most significant challenges that CPS has faced, which parents in particular and taxpayers have been very concerned about, are the financial pressures, including, pension obligations, the uncertainty around federal funding, and then just other ongoing budget challenges. So how concerned are you at this point about the district's long-term fiscal outlook, and what difficult decisions do you think might be lying ahead?
So interestingly enough, I'm not overly concerned about the budget, and I'll explain why. One is there are a lot of competent people that are concerned about education. And the other thing, Suzet, is that this is fixable.
Sure.
I think I would be concerned if it was beyond the ability to be fixed. But because I know there lies some very, very specific things that we can do, it just requires us to come to the table and determine that education is indeed a priority for the city.
Absolutely.
If we do that, then the solutions will naturally evolve.
Okay.
I think we're in a special space now where this elected school board could be strong advocates to be able to build relationships with the General Assembly in ways that have not happened before. If I'm being completely candid, I think there was a little bit of, and I know this having talked to members of the General Assembly, that they just didn't know. They don't intuitively know what pressures are upon us. They don't intuitively know that our fiscal challenges aren't a byproduct of poor management of dollars. So I think we have to spend some time educating them.
Sure.
Educating the public on where the pressures are, And I think with that will become an understanding of how they need to show up in order to fully fund our educational system.
And ensuring that the communication pathways are clear and bi-directional, right?
Absolutely.
So I want to talk a little bit about student achievement. You know, student achievement, chronic absenteeism, and learning recovery remain top concerns for many families, especially in this post-COVID era. Where do you believe CPS is making meaningful progress in those areas, and where must the district accelerate its efforts?
No, great question. I think just to go back to the budgetary issue, what actually concerns me is that discussion takes all the air out the room.
Okay.
And we almost finitely focus on the budget, and we don't talk about the educational gains and where our focus needs to be, particularly as we move into an AI economy. We need to be making very thoughtful and strategic investments in our schools to make sure that our students are able to take advantage of this new workforce that is going to ultimately be required based on AI. So that's really where my concern lies, and where the opportunity, I think, also exists, is we have to be able to deal with the current fire while also looking at the future.
Absolutely.
That's the biggest challenge that the district has.
Absolutely. You bring up some very critical points and very important issues that everyone is concerned about. So as we wrap up the conversation, my final question is, you know, you've had a front row seat to the relationship between CPS, City Hall, as well as the Chicago Teachers Union. So as you look ahead, what structural changes, if any, do you think would help to create greater stability and reduce the political turbulence that has often surrounded the district?
No, it's a legit question, but I think the reality is that there's no way to inoculate the district from politics.
Sure.
So we have to be thoughtful about how to embrace it and make sure it doesn't take us off the focus of educating the students. I think both can exist, and we have to become more savvy in managing both, because that's the source of our revenue. So we have to have the political connections to the General Assembly, to the mayor's office. You know, it can't go unstated how critical that relationship is, particularly as we go through the disentanglement. Right now, the City Hall was our single source of revenue that kept us from having, or supported us having a balanced budget.
Okay.
So we can't throw away those relationships. We need to cultivate them. I think there's plenty of opportunity. What's happening, though, is people are using new muscles. We've not had to do this before. And so anytime you first start going to the gym, it's uncomfortable, it hurts a bit. You know, we have to start to figure it out. I think that's where we are now, and I have confidence that we'll continue to do it. It takes folks, though, to give each other patience and grace, and not to become frustrated that we don't have the results we want almost immediately. None of this stuff happens overnight.
Absolutely. Well, as I'm sure you know, the challenges and the successes even of CPS are a frequent topic of conversation here on the newsroom. And what a pleasure it has been to have you to come in and directly talk about your goals, the work that you've done throughout your presidency, and where you see the district moving forward.
I appreciate you having me on. I love to be able to come back, particularly as we move closer towards the forward transition, be able to identify where the opportunities exist, and most importantly, to identify what we've learned in the past to help us ensure that we have a strong future.
Well, we will look forward to that.
Great,
Thank you so much. On the other side of the break, First Independent Bank's Demetrius Hutcherson and Andrew Maychruk join us to talk about the Black-owned bank's expansion into the Chicago market and what it means for the city's historically underserved communities. Stay with us.
Got something to say about Chicago? Now's your chance to be heard. Chicago Newsroom 2.0 is launching Opinion, a new segment where everyday Chicagoans take the mic. Whether it's a neighborhood issue that's been ignored, a citywide concern that needs attention, or a fresh idea that could change our city, we want to hear from you. Submit your commentary at cantv.org/opinion. If selected, we'll invite you on air to share your perspective with all of Chicago. Experience the power of community television.
Joining us to discuss the bank's expansion into Chicago, its vision for the market, and how it plans to serve residents and businesses across the region are Demetrius Hutcherson, president of First Independence Bank, and Andrew Maychruk, Senior Vice President and Regional Chicago Market President. Gentlemen, welcome to the Newsroom. Happy to have you here and welcome to Chicago.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to get straight into it. Let's start with the big picture. Chicago and Detroit are very similar. We call each other Midwestern cousins. But what made Chicago an attractive market for First Independence, and why was acquiring the former Metcalf Bank operation the right opportunity to expand your presence here in Chicago? I mean, what went on in terms of your mind, in terms of mitigating risk factors?
Well, thanks for having us here, and I'll tell you, it was an opportunistic thing for us to be able to come into the Chicago market. We have always been intentional in our desire to enter the Chicago market. Prior to acquiring Metcalf, we had a consultant that was working in the area, helping us to try and identify opportunities for commercial loan production growth. And the way that we were able to come in and acquire Metcalf through an FDIC-assisted acquisition, it created a lower cost to entry and an opportunity to enter a market that we coveted at the second largest financial market in the nation. Creates a myriad of opportunities for us to grow and really use the same principles and ethos that we've used in the Detroit market. So we saw it as an opportunity that it was just too good to pass on.
Yeah. Well, for customers who previously banked at Metcalf, and I'm going to ask you this one, Andrew. What should they know about, the transition to First Independence Bank, and what changes, and perhaps what are some of the opportunities they can expect?
Sure. Well, first off, we've entered the marketplace, and we're here for the long term. We are a service-focused organization, and without a local presence and local knowledge base, you can't succeed. Mm-hmm. Second off, we want to be involved in the communities. We feel that, if we're going to be successful, we need to give back to those organizations within the neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. As well as we expand, we're not going to lose sight of those customers and clients who were involved with Metcalf. So we not only want to grow, but also support those who made the organization that they were.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's really special about First Independence is that it has a long history as a Black-owned, mission-driven financial services organization. So how does that mission really shape the way you approach lending, investment, and community development, and particularly in communities that have been sort of left behind by the traditional mainstream banks?
Well, it really goes back to the genesis of why First Independence Bank opened its doors over 56 years ago. We were in a community where folks they felt disenfranchised. The opportunities for economic advancement and empowerment through banks were really not many existed. So for us to open up the bank and establish it, it created an opportunity to serve and be a beacon of hope for individuals in that demographic. Similarly, there's some similarities around the demographics between Chicago and Detroit, and we are employing that same framework and approach to those communities that want home ownership, that are striving for financial wellness and financial literacy to position themselves for home ownership, which is one way that you create generational wealth that you can pass through your family. So we will embody that same framework to the Chicagoland market, which is bigger, and it will create more opportunities for us to grow and expand our customer base.
That's a great follow-up to the next question. Chicago is home to thousands, as you know, of small businesses and entrepreneurs who cite, access to capital is a major challenge. And so what specific products, programs, or lending strategies will First Independence bring to the market that will help these businesses grow and thrive?
We offer the same products that the big banks have, retail, commercial checking and savings, home equity loans, residential mortgage loans, down payment assistance programs for individuals. The thing is, our focus is going to probably be initially geared towards those individuals that may not have access to that. They may not get the opportunity to get financial wellness or financial literacy training to position them for home ownership. Individuals that want a commercial loan, a term loan to expand their business, we offer those same products, and those are attractive features. But again, our focus is on those communities. But the difference also is that while we are focusing on that specific demographic of individuals, we are also a bank for everybody. We are Black owned and controlled, but we are not Black only. We are a bank for everybody. And the one key thing, while we may only have 5 branch systems, we have relationships with all of the big global banks, wherein individuals that have a bank account with First Independence Bank, you have access to over 55,000 ATM machines where you can make ATM withdrawals and not be assessed a surcharge. Those are great features.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And so Chicago is such a city that civic engagement by any business coming into market that's going to be critical to your success. Beyond banking services, many community leaders are looking for true financial partners. And so how does First Independence plan to engage with Chicago's neighborhoods, nonprofit organizations, civic institutions to drive, economic development and wealth creation?
I think more recently we've had that interaction in the communities. Andrew, I think it'd be great to talk about what happened, what was last week.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of it is, and as you mentioned, commonality. We were fortunate enough to host a number of students from a Money Matters program in Detroit. They had the opportunity to tour the Obama President's Center. After they were finished, we invited them over to our office, and we had a great conversation about careers in banking, fintech, as well as the future directions around overall financial services. When we think in terms of that community involvement, we have staff who are involved with non-for-profits. One non-for-profit that comes to mind that's based in Maywood is Housing Forward. And they are focused strictly around ending homelessness. Their impact isn't just Maywood, it's across a number of areas within the Cook County area. And then when you think in terms of how are we contributing, how we are succeed is based upon our customers' success. So seeking out relationships, whether it's entrepreneurs or small businesses that are focused on growing economic as well as wealth creation. For us to succeed, our customers need to succeed.
And that's a great way to wrap up. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here today with us. Looking forward to seeing the magic that First Independence is going to create here in Chicago, and I hope to have you back real soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
On the other side of the break, Howard Brown Health CEO Dr. Travis Gayles joins Suzet to shine a spotlight on proposed federal healthcare funding reductions that could prove catastrophic for underserved communities throughout Chicago. Stay with us.
Got something to say about Chicago? Now's your chance to be heard. Chicago Newsroom 2.0 is launching Opinion, a new segment where everyday Chicagoans take the mic. Whether it's a neighborhood issue that's been ignored, a citywide concern that needs attention, or a fresh idea that could change our city, we want to hear from you. Submit your commentary at cantv.org/opinion. If selected, we'll invite you on air to share your perspective with all of Chicago. Experience the power of community television.
They say television is about sitting back. We say it's about stepping up. Your block has stories worth telling. Your neighbors have voices worth hearing. Chicago has a heartbeat worth sharing. Stop watching their world. Start showing yours. It's time to tune in and be seen. Can TV, always here, always yours. Experience the power of community television.
As policymakers in Washington continue to debate federal spending priorities, healthcare advocates across the country are sounding the alarm about what they say could be devastating consequences for patients, providers, and communities alike. Last month, a coalition of healthcare, labor, public health, and community organizations, including Howard Brown Health, launched a national week of action called 7 Days in June, Health is Primary, aimed at raising awareness about more than $1 trillion in proposed healthcare funding cuts and the potential impact on everything from Medicaid and medical research, disease prevention, and public health infrastructure. Joining us to discuss what these proposed changes could mean here in Chicago, the state of public health in a rapidly changing political environment, and why advocates believe healthcare must remain a national priority, is Dr. Travis Gayles, CEO of Howard Brown Health. Dr. Gayles, thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, and thank you.
And welcome to the newsroom.
Thank you.
Okay, so this national coalition of healthcare and public health organizations is warning that proposed federal funding cuts could have far-reaching consequences. From your perspective, what's at stake every day for everyday Chicagoans if those cuts and programs in Medicaid, the CDC, and the National Institutes of Health move forward?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the issue. The cuts that are talked about could have profound impact on the daily lives of Chicagoans. There are multiple areas. The first one is just the fact that at the federal level, there isn't a full appreciation of public health and research and science. And that lack of full appreciation has led to making cuts to research grants that promote promising therapies for many of the conditions that we face. It's meant cutting funding around social support services that we know have increased and improved the outcomes of Chicagoans who rely on those systems of support to be able to make to live their daily lives and live healthy lives. And on the larger perspective, when we talk about things like Medicaid, we celebrate the fact that Medicaid expansion got lots of folks coverage, but the question remains is what do they have coverage and access to? And those cuts are chipping away at the safety net services that are supporting individuals with Medicaid. It's limiting what folks have access to in terms of medical treatment. It's also making it much more challenging for folks to figure out how to navigate the system. Yes, you have health insurance, but is your primary care provider close to where you live? Sure. Do you know who that person is? And when you talk about the services that you're eligible for, what's your copay? What's the affordability related to that? And how difficult is it to navigate that system to get the services that you're eligible for?
You know, this issue really brings validation to the position that many public health professionals have, in that they believe that they do their work in silence. And because you can't really see the work of public health every day, it's always a target for funding cuts, typically the first target. Would you agree?
I do, and as a former health department director, we always used to say, if we're doing our jobs well, you don't hear about us.
That's
you
right.
don't know about us. And in fact, most Americans knew very little about the public health infrastructure system until COVID hit.
Sure.
Now everyone is familiar with it.
That's right.
And because of that, we've got people who do support and understand the value of public health, but it's also created a significant cohort of folks who are anti-science, anti-public health, and that type of sentiment is influencing, again, funding decisions. It's also influencing the type of information that is getting out that people have access to, which is dangerous because we know that that information is what people utilize to be able to make healthcare decisions for themselves and their families.
That's right. Well, Howard Brown Health serves thousands of patients across Chicago, many of whom rely on affordable, accessible care. How would reductions in this federal health care funding affect community health centers and the patients that they serve?
Large-scale impact. So again, starting with grant funding that many federally qualified health centers and community health centers rely on in terms of being able to pay employees, keep the doors open, and offer the safety net services that community health centers rely on and patients rely on because they don't have many other options. The funding cuts would also have a significant impact in key areas such as HIV prevention and treatment.
Sure.
Because we know that 1 in 3 Chicagoans actually who are living with HIV receive their services at Howard Brown. And those services include treatment, but it also includes those safety net and social support services that have been proven to be impactful and make sure that folks have the services they need and are able to focus on their health and achieve undetectable status.
So organizers of the Health is Primary campaign argue that health should be viewed not as a political issue, but more as a fundamental community and economic issue. Why is that distinction important right now?
Well, for those who have really good health insurance, it's easy to say, well, I got mine. I don't, when you're talking about Medicaid and access, I'm good with mine. When we talk about it in the context of a political right and a birthright opportunity, it broadens the level of support and it gets folks to understand if we don't have access across the board, that means that folks are less likely to get primary care and preventative services to keep their chronic diseases in check. That increases the likelihood that an individual will utilize an emergency room for primary care services, which drives up costs for everybody. And when we really think about the types of services that folks are utilizing and are getting funded through the health insurance exchange, it's just important to understand that when everybody is healthy, we all benefit.
That's right.
Because when folks are healthy, they show up to work, they show up to school, they're productive members of society because they're able to focus on things outside of their health. And so by talking about it in the context of a right, that makes sure that all of us understand how having access to health insurance benefits everybody and not just you if you've got great insurance versus someone else.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned COVID a few moments ago. I think we've learned a great deal since COVID-19 about the importance of public health infrastructure. So are you concerned that cuts to public health systems could leave communities less prepared for future public health emergencies?
Absolutely. First and foremost, lack of public health response and infrastructure could introduce things that we haven't had to think about before.
Sure.
You know, when I grew up, everyone got a measles vaccination.
That's right.
Now we've seen multiple examples as recently as last week of a potential measles exposure at O'Hare. And so as we chip away at the public health infrastructure, we're chipping away at the education that folks receive to understand the importance of the public health apparatus, whether it's vaccinations, restaurant inspections, and so forth, disease control. It also chips away at the opportunity for us to continue to push long-standing evidence-based practices that we know have kept decades and hundreds of millions of Americans, including Chicagoans, safe. And that's concerning because folks question what has been long-held practices that have kept us safe and kept us thriving.
That's right. And you talked about vaccinations, we talked about the infrastructure, but there are also growing concerns about chronic disease and the strain on public health workforces. Which of these challenges worries you the most and why?
Well, I'll be perfectly candid as my niece likes to say, a middle-aged person. I am seeing a generation of men, in particular men of color, dying prematurely from chronic diseases that could have been managed if they were seeking and had access to primary care.
That's right.
Unfortunately, many of these men are presenting with symptoms when they're having a heart attack, they're having a stroke, and it's too late. Similarly, when we look at maternal mortality related to pregnancy outcomes, particularly for women of color, we see that the system is failing those communities because outcomes are so much worse than other populations. So when we're talking about cuts to the public health infrastructure from an education perspective, when we're talking about cuts to access to care, we're seeing the manifestations of those acts on generations of folks, and we're losing them prematurely. So couple that with the stress on the public health infrastructure and the public health workforce, I'm nervous about what this looks like if we continue to see these assaults in the form of knowledge gaps, funding cuts, and just outright assaults on the services that we're providing.
Not to mention also the impact that these cuts could have on our safety net hospitals, which many of these communities use those hospitals for their care. So it seems the issues just continue to compound. So for viewers who may not see themselves as directly affected by these debates, what's your message to them about why healthcare funding, medical research, and public health investments matter to every American family and community?
Well, everyone benefits from a solid, robust infrastructure, and disease does not discriminate. Diabetes doesn't discriminate. We saw it when COVID hit. COVID wiped out lots of folks. It did not discriminate on race, ethnicity. It disproportionately impacted those who were of older age groups initially, but over time, it impacted us all. And so when we don't have a robust response and a robust infrastructure to be able to address these concerns, we all will inevitably be impacted in some way, shape, or form, whether it's us directly or some of our family members, our community members, our coworkers, or other folks that we interface with on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Such important information. It's really important to educate the American people, the public, particularly folks in communities, so that they can do their part to advocate. So, Dr. Travis Gayles, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much.
Over to you, Glenn.
We want to hear from you, Chicago. Got an opinion on a topic you've been wanting to get off your chest? CAN TV is the place to do it. Share your opinion with us in 250 words or less. If your submission is selected, we'll invite you to join us on the air to present your perspective to the entire city.
With that, we bring this week's newsroom to a close. As always, Chicago, thank you for making time for Chicago Newsroom 2.0 and CAN TV in your busy day.
Until we see you again, be well and well informed.